So remember these guys, Brad Gerstner and Bill Gurley, who between them have made more than $10 billion US through savvy investment in technology. A couple of big brains who put their money where their mouth is and have produced excellent returns. Discussing Tesla FSD and the profound breakthrough with V12. If you didn't watch this video, I highly recommend it. By the time I publish this, it's only a couple of days old. Elon Musk suggesting that their analysis was accurate. Fancy that. Well, guess what? The boys are back. The clip I recently featured, which Musk described as an accurate analysis, was a couple of months old. And now these guys are back with some more thoughts on Tesla FSD, autonomy, Robotaxi versus Uber, and loads more. Strap yourselves in. This is not only going to be long, but extremely informative and insightful.
So the next thing we're going to talk about, I want to kick it off. So we're going to talk about autonomous vehicles and whether or not and how they would compete with ride-sharing services. And the thing that I think is bringing this topic to the forefront, obviously you and I have talked about this for I don't know how long now, many years, as both being earlier investors in Uber. But I think the thing that's bringing it to the forefront are twofold. One, Tesla has had some breakthroughs with FSD 12, and they've already announced they're going to start talking about their Robotaxi initiative in a more public way. And then Waymo is open and available in more cities, and people are riding in them, and so they're having experiences. So I'll just stop there, like as a kickoff, and let you go next.
Great. Well, I mean, I was up in the city. I was up in the city last night. I was shocked by the number of Waymos I saw. I saw them everywhere.
Yeah.
And you know, it reminded me, like none of them had drivers. None of them had anybody in the front seat. They had riders in the car. And, I think in the city of San Francisco and these other cities, I mean, that was just mind boggling when you saw it the first time. And there was at one point, I had 3 cars around me and they were all Waymos. Right.
And people have eclipse-like experiences when they get into things.
Listen, I think part of the setup here is it's been a tough week for Tesla. They're laying off 14,000 people, or about 10% of their workforce. Car demand is clearly weak, right? That's on the one hand. On the other hand, there's some transformative things going on that you and I've talked about, right? These imitation models are clearly better than expected at scale. They're having a larger rollout of FSD. So now I think they pushed FSD out to everybody who has the technical capability on their Tesla in order to receive it. They've talked about dramatically lowering the cost of FSD to $99 a month. I think they've hit over 1 billion miles driven now with FSD. And by our estimates, they're adding over 1 billion miles a month. So I think that their confidence that their data advantage is increasing dramatically is going up. So there's some speculation out there, Elon's throwing the long ball on Robotaxi and all this. I don't believe any of that, right? I think that the conditions that get the company re-excited about Robotaxi is that FSD is going way, way better than they expected it would 18 months ago in terms of the technology, Bill, in terms of the technology that they have available.
Yeah.
So they've reprioritized Robotaxi.
They most certainly have. As I posted today, in today's episode of Follow the Breadcrumbs, Elon Musk announces that there will be a Robotaxi event from Tesla on 8/8. The date of this event is no coincidence. If you're not familiar with Chinese culture, 8 is the luckiest number of all. Soon after this event date was announced, Elon Musk makes an unannounced trip to China. Then we hear rumors that Tesla has received tentative approval for FSD in China. And then more rumors that Tom Zhu, an absolute beast, originally working for Tesla in China, did a killer job, got brought over to the US for factory ramps, is now heading back to China. It's really obvious at this point in time that Tesla is now quadrupling down on autonomy, trimming the fat, refocusing the company, and going balls to the wall. They wouldn't be doing this if they weren't confident they were on the cusp of solving this extremely difficult challenge. These are some very strong signals about Tesla's own confidence in the timing of autonomy.
He said, we're going to move it to the top of our priority list. And, and I think Elon announced that they're going to have an announcement in August. Now, of course, immediately after he does that, analysts dig in and they called the regulators in a couple different states, and the regulators said, we haven't heard from Tesla. And of course, there were tweets that went out and said that, a couple states regulators had not heard from this. I don't think that really means anything, but because of course, they could launch this in any city on the planet, right? They get from Abu Dhabi to, to South America. And certainly there's a city on the planet that wants to be first to have Tesla robotaxis. So go ahead.
I thought because I know you and I have talked about this, there are a number of topics that I think are important to consider and discuss that live beyond the technical feasibility. So I know there are people that would say, okay, even if they're at 4 nines are not enough, it's got to be 6 nines, or will it work in snow and all that kind of thing. But I would say for this discussion, let's put that aside. Let's assume Waymo and Tesla have both achieved the quality it takes for the vehicle to move around by itself. What are the other things that these companies need to think about in order to have a successful robo fleet, if you will?
Well, I'm going to touch on the technical thing real briefly, but and then go to the other elements required to have a successful robo fleet. Because I think, if you think about the way Waymo, you and I did this breakdown on FSD 12, and we said one of the downsides of Waymo and Cruise is they have these deterministic models, right? That they have hundreds of thousands of lines of code, and they all, are a rule about how they expect the car to behave.
Right.
Well,
in other words, they're extremely brittle. As long as nothing changes in their pre-mapped safe little sandpit, everything's fine. But as soon as something out of the ordinary that has been hard-coded occurs, what results is at best an embarrassing and brain-dead vehicle, and at worst, a death machine on wheels. Case in point, on screen now. This is embarrassing.
What the? Oh my God.
Oh, your God, indeed.
It's going the wrong way.
See, and this is why they're...
That's awkward. Now, this is a perfect example of what happens when you have an extremely brittle piece of technology. This vehicle is so fucking dumb, it's turned a corner, become confused, and is now driving the wrong fucking way down a road. An extremely dangerous situation. Embarrassing, awkward, and extremely dangerous.
It turns out in ride sharing, cities, airports impose a lot of specific rules on the ride sharing companies. They tell them where you can drop off, where you can pick up, how those cars have to behave in certain circumstances. So that would seem to lend itself to a deterministic model where you could just write a line of code that says, here's what you do at an airport in San Francisco. So one of the things I had a question on is just, can an imitation model, right, that's imitating 5-star drivers, can it easily have these deterministic components to it? And so I talked to some friends, who are working on this, and they said, think of it like, once the user inputs, I'm going from, San Francisco to the San Francisco airport, that they would drop that information into the prompt, right? So that would tune the general model so that they actually have been thinking about, right, how to solve that technical problem. Because it certainly was one of the things on my mind. But okay, let's assume that they both have this cracked and that this becomes standard and ubiquitous, that these cars can drive around. Well, one of the reasons you invested in Uber is that as Uber grows, the power of the network effects gets even bigger. Right. And so they have more.
By the way, just want to point out, in case you guys are unaware, Tesla today has roughly 6 million vehicles on roads globally, and Uber has roughly 6 million drivers, including those who operate their Uber part-time. Now, this doesn't mean that 100% of all the Tesla vehicles on roads tomorrow will immediately start operating as robotaxis. Just to point out the scale, Tesla already has as many vehicles on roads as Uber has drivers globally. And Tesla's going to add another 2 million, give or take, in the next 12 months. A couple of years from now, the number of Tesla vehicles on roads will be double that of all Uber drivers, then triple, then quadruple, and it ain't going to stop there. A little bit of food for thought.
More riders, which leads to more drivers, which reduces wait times, which creates better experience, which leads to more riders. And you have this virtuous cycle that's created by that. Obviously, that's made it very difficult on Uber's competitors, and they're achieving the natural market leadership economics and share position that you would expect vis-a-vis Lyft. Particularly now that access to capital to Lyft, got a lot harder. So there's, so we can start by just asking the question, how do we think Tesla will go to market with its Robotaxi, right? In the case of Waymo, they've chosen to go to market both directly. You can book it on a Waymo app, or in Phoenix, for example, you can book it on the Uber app. So you can book your Waymo on the Uber app. And so in that case, Waymo recognizes it's a very small fleet, right? In that case, Waymo owns the fleet, so huge costs of ownership there for Waymo. They want to drive utility of that fleet, so they're using Uber as third-party demand generation into that, and they have an economic revenue sharing relationship between those two companies. Now, of course, that's not the way, I would think that Elon might approach it, right? He has the potential to be much bigger. Tesla's a much better known brand. There are millions of people with the app already on their phone. So I think most of the people I talk to, Bill, suggest in the first instance that he'll build an owned and operated fleet, right? Where he may have outside financiers or rental car companies that take ownership of the car. But insofar as booking that fleet, you would go through the Tesla app. We could talk about it. I throw it back to you. Let's just say that's the approach that they take. What is what are Tesla's chances of breaking into breaking down the network effects that Uber currently has on rideshare demand?
Well, I think you've hit on a key point, which is I think you have to separate Tesla from everybody else. Waymo, and I don't know if Cruise and Aurora still aspire to compete with Waymo or not, but they all have this very high-tech infrastructure with LiDAR that we've talked about. And they're all here to date working on a model where they own and operate all the cars, which we should get into in a little bit because financially, I think that's a complete disaster.
Understatement of the century. Companies like Cruise and Waymo have a model where they spend 6+ figures on the hardware, $150,000 to put a car on roads, to then charge a couple of dollars per mile for mostly autonomous rides in very small pockets that need to be pre-mapped in HD, lots of safety nets and guardrails in place, and teleoperators on call just in case shit hits the fan, which it does. This is not a scalable solution. Remember earlier I pointed out there are 6 million Uber drivers globally today. To reach critical mass in even a tiny pocket of a single city, these companies would need to spend hundreds of millions, potentially $1 billion+ just putting vehicles on roads. The payback time on these things, astronomical. It's a horrible business model. The hardware is so expensive. Tesla's model, on the other hand, at this point in time, sell the vehicles to customers, make a profit doing so, charge the customers thousands of dollars for the software, and in the future, when autonomy is solved, customers can opt into the Tesla Robotaxi network and have their vehicle pick people up and drop them off autonomously. Tesla takes a cut, a platform fee, maybe 20-30%. The owner of the vehicle gets the rest. Prints money. Of course, it is extremely likely in the future, given the insane economics of robotaxis, where no driver is necessary, that Tesla will begin producing their own dedicated robotaxis to operate themselves, possibly partner with fleets, or maybe a combination, because these things are likely to return their entire cost, or close enough to it, in a single year, as opposed to a Cruise or Waymo vehicle. Tesla could already produce vehicles today in the $30,000 range. The next-gen vehicle, they're looking for about a $25,000 purchase price. Probably making these things, we'll call it $20,000, maybe a little bit less, whatever, who cares? The point is, Tesla can produce the hardware to do the same job as a Cruise or Waymo vehicle for a fraction of the cost. We're talking like 10-15% the cost. And importantly, it's not just the enormous cost advantage, which enough seals their fate. Well, Tesla has expertise in high volume production. They will be able to pump these things out, the next gen dedicated robotaxi, at a staggering rate. That's the whole point of the next generation manufacturing system, to speed up the process and drive costs down. Bill Gurley's description of the financially disastrous business model for companies like Cruise and Waymo, absolutely on point. They are fucked.
Tesla has the benefit that they can utilize, theoretically, the cars that are already owned by their customers and not have to front the cap for each and every vehicle. If you look at the data we already have, Cruise was losing, $3 billion? Aurora's public lost $2 billion 2 years ago, $1 billion last year, and virtually no revenue. I have zero reason to believe, and if anyone wants to share data with us to correct this, that Waymo's financials don't look exactly like both of the ones.
What do you think Waymo's worth today?
They did we can look up I mean, it's a private
No,
company.
I'm asking you. Like
all we can look up is what it traded for last time. Well, even Aurora is trading at what, $4 billion here with no revenue and $1 billion a year of losses. So there's the Wall Street speculating that the IP has value.
So keep going on Waymo.
But here's the thing. I think it really comes down to supply and demand. There is a beautiful emergent quality of the Uber model where supply and demand are matched, and it's enhanced with price through surcharges. But there are plenty of people who want to make incremental money that know when to get on the road. I have a chart which we can put up, which shows at one point in time the weekly pattern of ride sharing, and it's remarkably nonlinear, right? It peaks in the morning, it peaks in the evening, it really peaks on Friday and Saturday. And Waymo or anyone like them with an owned fleet here's a huge conundrum. Are you going to build the fleet to average or peak? And by the way, you lose whatever your answer is. If you build it to average, you're not going to be able to serve your customers during the peak at all. Like, they're only going to be disappointed. And if you build it to peak, you're going to have a bunch of very, very, very expensive CapEx sitting around doing nothing most of the time.
So I think this is the most critical point, right? Because this is the same challenge that Amazon faced, which led to the creation of AWS. This is the same challenge that, most businesses face, which is they have very spiky demand periods. And if you want to be an incredible customer experience, you have to have something that can regulate to those higher periods of demand. Like you said with Uber, they have a natural thing. They can just charge a little bit of peak pricing. They got more people who get out of their houses, drive their cars, pick you up. Wait times don't go up that much, and they benefit from that. And as the network expands, it gets even better.
Well, and you remember, it goes back to, what was that word when Airbnb first came out? It was asset sharing. There's a different word that was used. But there's a huge amount of cars, especially in the US, that are sitting mostly idle.
Correct.
And so Uber gets to take advantage of that and utilize that CapEx. Anyone and Tesla may have a similar advantage just because they have enough customers. Someone trying to build a completely separate fleet, I just don't think it works. And I would encourage anyone that believes in it, or anyone that's let's call them a Waymo advocate, let's build a public Google sheet of the 20-year financial statements for this thing, and let's put it out there in the public. You're going to need hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, and I don't know how you answer this peak versus average. I don't.
So I just want to be clear. I'm pretty sure what Bill is saying is the company's attempting to compete with Tesla on this, who instead of selling cars to customers for a massive profit and charging for the software for a massive profit and already having a massive existing fleet, are fucked. The challenge there about making a public valuation model, he's saying this for a reason. The fact that these companies would somehow need to spend hundreds of billions of dollars, he means what he says. No company has Tesla's fleet, or their business model, or their data. It's a done deal. I know I sound hyperbolic, but the kind of questions Bill's asking here, in essence, is how the fuck could anyone compete with Tesla? And not just how the fuck, but seriously, how the fuck? Build the model. Look at the numbers and try to explain how the fuck that makes any sense. Is that feasible? Spending hundreds of billions of dollars, losing insane amounts of capital, while simultaneously attempting to compete with Tesla, who are scaling at a staggering rate with a generalized solution and already have the fleet of 6 million vehicles, ever growing, plus a new dedicated Robotaxi will be cranking out. It is over. And I encourage anyone watching, build a model for a company like Cruise or Waymo, and then try to explain how the fuck that's sustainable or even viable.
Don't know how you do
it. So let's talk about some of the ways that might happen, right? As a Tesla owner, if I had the opportunity to put my Tesla in a pool, right, and allow it to be, pulled out during peak periods of time, for rideshare, I'd have a problem with that because I need my car during those periods of time.
Well, it's very likely. Here's another way of saying what you're saying, which is it's very likely that the average Tesla owner's usage map is similar,
of course,
to the Uber map that we just put on the screen.
This is my point. So here would be a straw man Tesla launches with an owned and operated fleet to prove the models, to start building, right, the customer affinity with the product, the customer trust.
Which would unquestionably work because there's so many Tesla fans.
Correct.
That would want to do it just to be supportive of the team.
By the way, it's a great product. It feels great. You probably already have a Tesla, so you feel good about FSD. So my hunch is they launch an own.
You might even launch it at first with only allowing Tesla owner or something like that. Because,
interesting. Like it's almost like a benefit of ownership. So then I think what they do is, my hunch is that they will open it up and partner with Uber. I think Uber would like that. I think Tesla would like it. And here's my argument for that. The only way you solve the peak demand problem, Bill, is that you have to basically have high utilization at lower periods of demand. You have to reduce the delta between your trough and your peak. And the way you do that is you pull in the Uber demand when your demand is lower, right? And so an example of that would be, if you think about in the city of New York, McDonald's has an app. You can go on the McDonald's app and you can order a burger, right? Or you can go on the Uber Eats app or the DoorDash app and order a burger. And so McDonald's recognizes that they want to try to flatten that demand out over the course of the day. And so they can yield manage that by having both a 3P and a 1P strategy. So it seems to me that the only way you really crack this is have a 3P and 1P strategy. And the upside to that, in addition, right, is that now you have a flywheel of Uber drivers, right, potentially building some mini fleets of their own, right? You could imagine somebody who says, hey, this is pretty accretive. We saw this with black cars, I know, in the early days, where you had one operator that may, have 2 or 3 or 4 black cars. You could imagine somebody who says, listen, I can make money by arbing this system and by having multiple Teslas in that fleet. So I think they probably launch it on a standalone basis. They get a lot of excitement and a lot of customer love for it. But my sense is by the time you scale this, it probably does have to be an open system.
We'll see. Yeah. And I mean, that's clearly up to the powers that be at Tesla to make that decision. The two companies have partnered to date already. They have quite a number of initiatives, including like free charging for people that buy them and put them on. So there's a close partnership already. But as this plays out, we may see reasons why they may not want to.
Can we talk a little bit just about the unit economics? Of these different businesses.
Yeah, there's one thing I want to bring up specifically that'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and that's insurance. And so last time I had specific knowledge, and it's been 4 or 5 years, but I doubt it changed that much. The cost per mile of insurance for Uber in the U.S. is dramatically higher than the rest of the world. And if you look at just the cost of consumer car insurance, the same thing's true, way higher in the U.S., which gets to another problem with regulatory costs.
For sure.
That our government should try and fix. But anyway, it strikes me, and I would be worried about this as an investor. It strikes me that a particularly aggressive lawyer would chomp at the bit to get in front of a jury on a robot killing a human, and maybe even create more litigation costs and a higher cost of insurance for a robotaxi than a driver. Now, I know how our listeners are going to react to that. They are convinced in their heart of hearts and in their brain that these are safer than human drivers. And I am saying this even with that potentially being true. We may have just such a broken litigation situation in the U.S.
Can confirm the litigation system in the US is beyond broken. It's got to be one of, if not the most litigious societies on earth. And one of the most insane things, and I mean insane, is that in the United States, lawfare is an effective weapon. You can literally bankrupt people with frivolous lawsuits. Here's a crazy idea. Wait for this, ready? Imagine, wait for it, a blanket rule whereby the losing party in any lawsuit pays everybody's legal costs. Boom. Suddenly a huge problem is solved. Doesn't solve everything. It goes a long fucking way. I mean, it's absolutely fucking insane. You a fat fuck? Cool. Sue a fast food company because you have no self-control and you're a fat fuck. Don't take any personal responsibility. Want to stop somebody successfully running for president of the United States? Wait, I better not go there. I might get deleted from YouTube. Hey, YouTube, go fuck yourselves. Seriously. Anyway, Bill's point is valid. I mean, we've seen what's happened recently with the extremely corrupt activist pretending to be a judge in Delaware, Kathleen McSeaborn, attempting to rob Elon Musk of his justly earned compensation years after the fact. And then the insanely greedy lawyers seeking over $5 billion US in fees for fucking Tesla investors. I mean, call me crazy, but I thought typically the arrangement was people pay to fuck somebody, not get paid for fucking somebody, but hey, whatever. So Bill does have a point. Some bloodthirsty vultures are likely to be licking their lips at the very idea of robotaxis scaling widely in the US, looking for a big payday, even if they are demonstrably safer than human drivers.
That the actual cost of underwriting the insurance for a robotaxi may be higher than a real car, and time will tell. And as we know, Tesla's already brought some of their insurance operations internally, and if they're willing to underwrite it themselves and fight it themselves.
Spoiler alert, that is exactly the case. You can count on it. I mean, obvious things are obvious. Tesla absolutely will offer an insurance product for those who operate Tesla robotaxis. Guaranteed. This is going to be one of the biggest hurdles otherwise. It's just so obvious. They're already building out their insurance product, scaling. It's already in a dozen plus states in the US. Extremely obvious. Total no-brainer. Plus, remember, Tesla has the data from their own fleet. As opposed to having to look at actuarial tables and guess based on statistical data, general data, they can see their own technology, their own accident rates. In other words, Tesla can price insurance on their products for their customers better than any third party can or ever will be able to do.
Maybe that's something they'll do as a part of this rolling out.
I got to take a tangent here for a second, and then I'll come back to these unit economics. You know, I was with a certain investor, group of investors in the Midwest, let's just say, over the weekend that are very big investors in the insurance business. And I asked them the question, I said, what's up with car insurance being up 22% in the CPI on a year-over-year basis? I mean, it was crazy. Car insurance up 22%. And he said, here's how it works, Bill. In 20 and 21, then we have very predictable and very steady number of miles driven in this country on a year-over-year basis, and the accident rate remains very steady. So the cost of our auto insurance has largely been, pretty flat, growing with GDP. What happened in 20 and 21, the number of miles driven fell a lot, okay? And so it fell so much that, those companies were prone to over-earn, right? Because there was less chance of an accident with fewer people driving, or at least that was the assumption. But what turned out to be true is that the miles that came off the road for some reason were safe miles, and the accidents per mile driven actually spiked a lot. So much so that the insurance companies lost a lot of money during this period of time. So they went to the state regulators who control insurance pricing, and they said, hey, we got to raise the price of insurance because we're losing money. Now, remember, auto insurance companies try to price the insurance to make about 3, 4, 5% on the insurance, and the rest of the money they make is on the float. Okay. But in those years, they were losing 5 to 10% on the insurance, right? So the companies were actually losing money even with the float. How long do you think it takes the California state regulator to pass along an insurance increase, right? You have to threaten them that you're going to leave the state and all this other stuff, and then eventually they do it. So now they passed on this insurance increase, and it just kicked in, which is what you saw in the CPI, right? And ironically, and not surprisingly, the patterns of driving have now returned to pre-COVID levels. So we went from a period where the auto insurance were not charging enough because they had to beg the state regulators and they were slow. And now they're charging too much. But set that aside for a second. Let's come back to the unit economic.
And by the way, I think this cost, this is a lot of guesswork. I apologize. People should treat it as such. But I think in the Uber case in the U.S., about 5% of gross revenue goes to insurance.
Yeah. So it's an expensive input,
yeah.
And we took a crack. Okay. So let's just say at the high level, most people think that taking the driver out of the Uber will lead to an explosion in profit margins because it represents 70% or 75% of the cost, of the ride. But we actually took a crack at these unit economics. And what I think that fails to understand is a couple of things. Number one, if you just break this down per car, we estimate that there's about $140,000 of revenue per car driven on the Uber network. Now, of course, this is blended across tons of different markets, tons of different cars, etc. So 140,000 of GBV. When you do that in self-driving, we think it goes down to about 100,000. Why? Well, you have actually more rides in the self-driven car, right? But it actually comes in at a lower cost because you put so many cars on the road that the charge to the consumer gets shared back with the consumer, right?
Completely agree with this. If you want to see my exact estimates across a range of scenarios, bear case, base case, bull case, and hyper bull case in terms of how much Tesla Robotaxis bring in per mile on average and how many miles they travel per year, check out my Tesla valuation model exclusively on Patreon with the link in the pinned comment. It's available to everyone at the investor level and above.
Margins come down as you have more competition because you have more cars on the road. Next up, the revenue per car. Well, of course, you take out 70% of the cost, the driver cost on the driver-driven car. So at a revenue level, we think that if you were comparing apples for apples, in the case of the person, the one with a driver, they make about $40,000 a car. Without the driver, they would make about $90,000 per car. This is just revenue. So about double the revenue. But the costs are way higher in the full self-driving case. Obviously, first up is you have to pay for the car, right? There are massive costs associated with that, maintaining the car, the insurance on the car, all the things the driver currently does now is dropped upon.
Well, and just on that first one, like, because I can go buy a 2-year-old used car for $25K, $30K and get on the road, like, and then you add in the cost of the human, like you need the fully autonomous car to be really cheap.
Well, fancy that. Bill just pointed out the example of being able to buy a really cheap used car for about $25,000. Why does $25,000 ring a bell? Oh, that's right. That's what Tesla's aiming for the purchase price of the next-gen vehicle to be. And by the way, purchase price does not equal cost to manufacture. So Bill's right. The more affordable the hardware, the Robotaxi, the better. Lucky for Tesla investors, they've already figured that part out. Shout out to the Robotaxi unveil on the 8th of August.
In order, because if it, and I don't think anyone thinks the current Waymo when you were surrounded by the other day is anywhere close to
No, those cars cost probably $150,000. Like it's
right.
not, it's
so
not
that
viable.
That car would need to get down towards this 30K number for that disruption to matter. If it's in the 45, 50K and it's an alternative to 30K plus a driver, you have no.
But again, where Tesla has an advantage, they probably can put a car on the road at those lower price points. So when we shake it all out, and I'm happy to,
But by the way, there's other things the driver does. I mean, the driver maintains the car. So once again, this is in the Tesla case, if it's not an owned fleet, it's a customer-owned fleet, they can clean it, and that'll just be a cost of putting your car out on the road. But in the case of a Waymo, like that car has to come back to headquarters at some point. Someone's got to get in it. Someone's got to clean it. There's eyes that are going to be needed. So there's going to be a customer service staff that's going to have a camera because you're going to have to settle disputes. You're going to have to deal with customers. And that the human does that in the case. So there are going to be other costs.
So the point is you have to take the 70% that you save on the driver, and then you have to add all these new costs that you're going to incur. We still think that the margin goes up from, let's call it 7% of gross bookings to something like 12 or 14% of gross bookings, even taking into account all of that, Bill. But that's what we're all trying to do. We're all trying to build a forecast and understand, assuming that this could work, assuming that regulators pass it, assuming you could build the $25,000 or $30,000 car, assuming that you could enter into a commercial relationship with Uber and yield manage the peak and demand. All of that is to say there are a lot of needles that have to be threaded in order for this to work at scale. And I think if it does work at scale, I don't, obviously talking our book a little bit here, I don't think this is much of a threat to Uber. In fact, I think if it works for Tesla, I think there's an opportunity for both companies.
And by the way, another way I'd restate what you just said, which is it's not going to be financially disruptive at the beginning or in the middle. It might theoretically be financially disruptive at the very end, but there's way too much capital and the price of the car has to come down. There's too much that has to happen. There's no way for someone's not going to come out tomorrow with a robo fleet and underprice Uber by 40%.
And let's put one final point here.
I'll tell you what, I'm looking forward to hearing these two guys chat after Tesla's Robotaxi unveil on the 8th of August.
Remember this deal that Tesla entered into with Hertz, where Hertz bought a bunch of Teslas? It turned out that the resale value on those cars was dramatically less than they had forecast. And the CEO lost his job over this. I think the write-down for Hertz was like $1 billion over this misforecast. So if you're in the business of buying and maintaining that fleet on behalf of Tesla, you're doing so with full knowledge that all of this is hard to forecast. So you're going to bake into your model a huge margin of safety, right? So that you're not going to have the problem that Hertz just ran into.
I would say, based on everything I know, and we're not, in the boardroom with these guys, but like letting the customers own the Teslas that own the fleet is much better alternative. Much better. And I will say this, the fact that we're even talking about a Robotaxi fleet shows you the incredible progress that Tesla has made. And, and what we talked about on the show a few weeks ago, the month-to-month improvement in the model, the data that they're collecting, and, just the anecdote I shared from last night, I am more convinced than I ever have that we're going to see tons of cars on the roads with no drivers, in the years ahead. You and I are just speculating as to how the business model might come together. But by the way, one last thing, I'm so sorry. I do think there's an argument that you might see this be prolific in a different country soon.
Of course.
Must have a weird glitch happening here. I don't know why this is on my screen again. China and Tesla and FSD obviously have nothing to do with what we just heard from Bill Gurley.
Both China and India have much higher road deaths per mile. So you could see the government wanting it to happen. China, being more autocratic, could just wave their hand and change insurance rates, mandates. They could just make it a reality. Whereas we in the U.S., with the way our litigation and regulation work, are very unlikely to clear the decks and make way for something.
I also think, as I mentioned earlier, Tesla and Uber coexist in a ton of markets around the world. And there are a lot of markets that, frankly, are more innovative than the United States, have less regulatory headwinds. I could see this happening in Abu Dhabi or Dubai. I could see this happening in Singapore. I could see this happening in South America. I could see this happening in Mexico. There are a ton of jurisdictions where I expect this, unfortunately, before I expect it in the U.S., at scale.
Once again, another fascinating discussion. Two guys who admit, given their investments in Uber, they could possibly have a little bit of a bias, maybe some blind spots, but very interesting to hear how they think Tesla's Robotaxi fleet might roll out and how extremely challenging, aka impossible, it will be for companies like Cruise and Waymo to compete when Tesla Robotaxis start operation. Now, I won't be surprised if at some point companies like Hertz, maybe even Uber themselves, the penny drops and they start buying fuck tons of Tesla vehicles to operate as Robotaxis as a new way of surviving. And I definitely agree some of the biggest hurdles will be insurance, but spoiler alert, Tesla's going to offer a product themselves, so that solves that. I also agree that being able to produce these Robotaxis for around that $25,000, $30,000 mark would be extremely useful. And spoiler alert, what do you think we're going to hear about on the 8th of August? Tesla's already told us about the next-gen vehicle aimed for $25,000 with a modular manufacturing system. I mean, hello, that's also a done deal. I also agree that over time, the cost to use a Robotaxi will be much more affordable than the cost of an Uber today. That being said, I think Brad is way off the mark with his expectations for Robotaxi margins. Extremely low. I believe he estimated $90,000 US in revenue for an autonomous vehicle, right? Let's assume that you've got to deduct the cost to produce it. Let's just say Tesla's making the vehicles. Let's say it cost Tesla $25,000. It's probably going to be less, but 25 grand to actually manufacture the Robotaxi. We're now down to $65,000. You got a little bit of maintenance, a little bit of energy, some cleaning fees, and then many tens of thousands of dollars of profit per year based on that $90,000 of revenue. For an initial investment of a few tens of thousands of dollars, again, I said about $30,000 to produce, right? Imagine how absolutely insane a situation Tesla may find themselves in, where they could produce a vehicle, let's just use some round numbers, for $30,000, and in 12 months, the vehicle, in pure profit, after all costs, has produced more than $30,000. Then in year 2, it produces another more than $30,000. And in year 3, 4, you get the point. The economics here are absolutely insane. And Bill's challenge to make a valuation model for a company like Cruise or Waymo, where they're spending about $150,000 a pop to put vehicles on roads. Go on, build the model. Explain how they're not going bankrupt. Because remember, Tesla does not exist in a vacuum. And again, if you guys would like to see my own valuation model, which includes the Robotaxi estimates, the first year, cents per mile over time for the whole decade, average miles driven per year per Robotaxi, what % of Tesla's total vehicles sold are actually operating as Robotaxis, sold/produced to be technical, click the link in the pinned comment to join Patreon at the investor level and above. You do not want to be sleeping on this opportunity. It is colossal. Want more content? Early access? Bunch of perks? Click the links in the pinned comment. AG1 has given me a massive, meaningful boost in energy, allowing me to do a lot more every day, including using my brain more and using my body more. I highly recommend you guys and girls check it out. It's an excellent way to fill in nutritional gaps. It's got 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, and whole food source nutrients, plus prebiotics and probiotics and digestive enzymes and adaptogens to help you deal with stress. Plus, if you click the link in the pinned comment or head to drinkag1.com/SMR, you can get yourself a 1-year free supply of vitamin D3 and K2. But don't take my word for it. Here's what some of you guys and girls have to say. AG1 has changed my life. I was, as you described, treating myself like a circus, ate like trash, rarely exercised, used alcohol as a stress crutch, cannabis also. AG1 is what gave me the kick in the ass, got me back to the gym, motivated me to do more for myself, family, my business, etc. Keep doing what you do. Now, I know there's some skeptics, the same kind of people who think Elon Musk is a fraud, reading this going, what do you thought? There's no way that's possible, bro. It must be a placebo effect. Believe it or not, this is a recurring theme. If you give your body everything it needs to feel and perform its best, including having a lot more energy, you'll need ways to use that energy. For me personally, that includes more exercise, moving my body more social activity, and more cognitively demanding tasks, including producing a fuck ton of exclusive content over on Twitter and on Patreon, plus my daily YouTube uploads. The proof's in the pudding. On to another testimonial from a viewer of this channel. SMR, you asked me to provide feedback on AG1. Here it is. It has helped with mental acuity, stamina, and intestinal waste management. Can't read between the lines. It certainly helps with regularity and digestion. That's what the digestive enzymes are for. It has also dramatically reduced my cravings for sugar. You guys need to stop eating sugar. It's fucking poison. I'm 50, 5'9", and overweight, aka a fat motherfucker. I think that's a technical term for overweight, isn't it? Is it fat motherfucker or obese? I can't remember. I average 100 hours a week in the West Texas oil fields as a safety supervisor. Jesus Christ, dude. No wonder you're struggling to keep your weight under control. 100 hours a week. Brutal. It has helped me lose weight. It is not an appetite suppressant. It can help fat people suppress cravings, and motivation to be healthier is critical for changing your diet. Love you, brother. Again, this is a great point. It's something people really don't seem to grasp. If you have more energy, everything becomes easier. It's like turning on easy mode for life. A few years ago, before I was taking AG1, my health was trash. I was struggling to get through the day, had afternoon fatigue. The last thing I wanted to do was either use my brain or move my body. Didn't have the energy. Now, my biggest struggle every day is figuring out ways to use that energy. I'm exercising way more, doing a lot more with my friends and family, and of course, my work output has increased substantially. And you can fact check me. Check out the average length of my videos I was posting to YouTube 3 years ago. Need I say more? And one final testimonial. Love this one. Okay, here's the deal for me with this AG1 shit. I'm 41 years old and not the type to eat, drink, smoke, or sleep healthy, so I was skeptical. That being said, here's what I experienced. Day 1, meh. Day 2, afternoon fatigue was about 45 minutes late. Day 3, 0 afternoon fatigue. Day 4, 0 afternoon fatigue plus extra energy. Day 5, again, 0 afternoon fatigue plus energy, wondering, what the fuck, really? See, this is the thing, right? The results for many people are just almost too good to be true. This is the same experience I had. My afternoon fatigue just vanished out of nowhere. I'm like, wait, what the fuck? Why am I not tired in the afternoons anymore? Surely, it's not that AG1 is it? Turns out it was. Day 6 and 7, same thing. Day 8, same thing. Plus, I had the want to get things done around the house that I normally would slack off and not get done. Again, the point, extra energy, you'll need to use it, you'll find ways to use it. Day 9, 10, and 11, and today is day 12. I fucking love it. So however you managed to get me to buy it, I'm so glad you did. Thank you so much, SMR. It really changed me so far. Guys, this shit really works. Just try it. By the way, this is the reason I continue to relentlessly promote AG1. A lot of people get real fucking mad in the comments. Oh my God, Snake Oil Salmon's sold out. Oh my God, he's a scammer. This is fraud. But constantly, I'm pretty sure everyone making these comments is also currently short Tesla stock. I'm not particularly concerned about people having a negative perception, those folks suffering from small brain syndrome, still living in my bum's basement syndrome, etc., writing mean comments, claiming AG1's a scam or it doesn't work. I mean, bro, when I get feedback like this is what keeps me going. Just try this stuff for a month, and if you don't get these results, get your money back. See, it's a literal no-brainer. It's an IQ test at this point in time. Testimonial after testimonial after testimonial like this. Get your money back if it doesn't work. Just try it for a month, and if it doesn't work, get your money back. Today's the day. It's finally time. Be like this guy who was a massive skeptic, but finally, after 1,000 promotions in a row, caved in, tried AG1, and has results like this. Head to drinkag1.com/SMR or click the link at the pinned comment, and please, let me know how you're feeling in a few weeks' time. Now, if you'll excuse me, time to put my extra energy to good use. I'll be recording some more exclusive content for Patreon and my Twitter subscribers. So click the links in the pinned comment. See you over on Twitter and or Patreon, and don't forget to grab your AG1. Love ya.